I bowed on my knees and cried, Holy. I dreamed of a city called Glory, so bright and so fair. When I entered the gate, I cried, Holy. The angels met me there. They carried me from mansion to mansion, and oh, what sights I saw. But I said, I want to see Jesus. He's the one who died for all. Then I bowed on my knees and cried, Holy, holy. I cried, Holy. Then I clapped my hands and said, Glory, glory to the Son of God. I thought as I entered that city, all my loved ones all knew me well. They showed me the streets of heaven, such scenes too numerous to tell. I saw Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Mark, Luke, and Timothy. Oh, but I said, I want to see Jesus. He's the one who died for me. Oh, then I bowed on my knees and cried, Holy, holy. I cried, Holy. Then I clapped my hands and said, Glory, glory to the Son of God. Glory to the Son of God. If this isn't love,
I was thinking as she was singing that last song of the thief on the cross. Can you imagine that old boy had no idea the notoriety that he was going to have, that all down through the ages we will remember him. And I don't know that he's ever named anywhere, which was probably a good thing. But imagine, he just said to the Lord, and I believe he recognized that truly that was the Christ, when he said, "Remember me when thou comest in thy kingdom." Never, ever would he have imagined that thousands of years later we would still be remembering him as to what happened to him on that day whenever that the Lord spoke to him and said, "Today shalt thou be with me in paradise." So what a wonderful, wonderful blessing he received that day. His last day on earth, his first day in heaven. And what a privilege he had to be one of the last friends of the Lord here on the earth, and one that went with him into paradise. I can't even begin to imagine what that would have been like. Neither can I imagine what it's going to be like for us one of these days when we finish our journey here. I'm going to use some scripture this morning in just a little bit different vein than what I don't know that I've even used this particular portion of it before, but than what I normally do. I want to talk just a little bit about what an important day not only that was for that thief whenever that Jesus spoke to him and said, "Today shalt thou be with me in paradise." But I want to talk about the most important, maybe the second most important day in our lives. The most important day in our lives for those of us who have been saved is when the Lord is going to send for us to come on home. The second most important, which may have precedence over it, was whenever the Lord spoke peace to our hearts and prepared us for the time whenever that we were going to go home. I hear many people talk, and I see people write about their birth dates, their first birth date and their second birth date, and I must admit that I do remember the date of my birth. I don't remember the day, of course, but I remember the date. My second one, I don't remember the date, but I certainly remember the experience. And all the years that I've been preaching, and I've put this challenge out a number of times, I've never had anyone come to me and say, "I am sorry the Lord saved me." Never had a single, I've never heard of a person whom the Lord has ever saved say they're sorry the Lord saved them. Now, there are a lot of times in our lives whenever that we may look pretty sorry and we may act pretty sorry, and people may think we're pretty sorry, but the truth of the matter is there's not a single one of us who have been saved that cannot remember that time, and that we cannot say without any reservation, "I am so thankful that the Lord saved my soul." I spoke just a couple of weeks ago, I believe it was, and said that as a child, I do not remember in our family that birthdays were very important. After I married Shirley and became a part of that family circle, I realized that I was in for a shock in that birthdays ranked right up there behind Christmas. The second most important day in their opinion was their birthday. Now, for some of us as we get older, maybe we don't think those are nearly as significant, But I'm still one of those people who believes that mine are pretty significant, that I'm still having them. And so I've never been bothered in that respect. But the most important one, and as I said earlier, that many people remember, is that day when the Lord saved their soul. But I want to talk about a man who was not very happy about his first birthday, the date when he was born. He's a man in the word of the Lord whom the Lord had blessed, had prospered him, who had a wonderful family, who was a God-fearing man, one whom the Lord said to Satan when he came before him, he said, "Hast thou considered my servant Job a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil?" So God gave his blessings upon this old boy by the name of Job, and had blessed him with as many blessings, materially speaking and spiritually speaking, as is possible. You might remember, I'm sure you remember the story of Job, how that whenever that his sons, he had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and those sons and invited the rest of the family to their homes on each respective day, and they celebrated together. They invited their sisters, and I'm sure all of their families. And Job, so every day he would say, you know, I'm going to make an offering unto the Lord, just peradventure that maybe they've gotten a little careless of something, and made petition to the Lord in their behalf. However, there was a day, according to the word of the Lord, whenever that they came before the Lord, and Satan came among them. And he was the one who had the conversation then with God about Job. And you may remember then that Satan put some challenges out and said, you know, there's some things that you could do to him that would cause him to curse you. And God granted Satan the privilege of doing many things unto Job, the last of which was to cover him, to allow him to take and to inflict him with boils from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet, and cause him to suffer physically immensely. I can assure you this morning that that would have been a horrendous suffering. And it not only then affected Job's physical being, it affected his mental being and his spiritual being. And so sometimes I think we need to understand that we need to be concerned about all of the individual, just not certain parts. We, of course, right now are going through this crisis where that we have such a tremendous physical problem that is going on, and we need to be concerned about that. But we also need to be concerned about the spirituality of our people and the mental attitude of our people, and much is being said about that now. But let me assure you this morning that each of those has an impact on the other. No question about it. We all need to understand that. Job had some friends after that Satan had come along and had stripped him of his material goods, had brought about the death of his children, of their families, of all of his flocks. Even his wife had finally said to him, you know, why don't you just curse God and die? I mean, she had reached the point to where that she was frustrated as to what was happening. And of course, then Job said, dost thou, but he said unto her, thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this did not Job sin with his lips. He had some friends who heard about what was going on in his life, and they decided they would come and try to comfort him and be supportive of him. Now, there are some times, as I mentioned recently in one of my sermons, whenever that we need to be able to help one another. We need to be supportive of one another. We need to be able to bear one another's burdens, as well as there being some times when we have things that we must do by ourselves. But Job's friends came and they were amazed at what they saw. They were not prepared for what their eyes beheld when they came here and saw the condition that Job was in. Let me assure you this morning that it was not a pleasant sight. He was not in a very good condition. And he probably could have used all the support that they could muster. Unfortunately, as happens many times, these men, after they had sat with him for several days and watched to see his suffering, misconstrued what was going on. And that can happen many times to our people today. There are many times whenever that our good intentions are not doing what we think they are. I learned some time ago that I need to be careful when I say, I know what you are experiencing, because I probably don't know. I may think I know, I may have had a similar experience, but I don't know just exactly what's going on in your heart and your life and how you're handling the situation. So Job's friends, when they got here and they sat with him, what was it, for several days, I want to think it was 7 days and 7 nights with him before they said anything. I've also found that sometimes the best thing that I can do to show my support to someone else is not to try to analyze their case or to give them all the answers to what I think their answers are to their problems, but just let them know I'm there and I care about them, that I love them, and that they are important. I think that's a good lesson for all of us, that many times it is not so much as to what we say as what we do. Spurgeon, and I've quoted this a number of times, once said, many a soul is bound for hell because of a well-intentioned Christian. And I think that we sometimes, our intentions, so they're good, have the wrong impact. Anyway, Job finally speaks. He has kept his silence as long as he can. Now remember, this is a man who has been blessed of God, whom God has been pleased with and has used him as his example unto Satan of a God-fearing man, one that eschewed evil and was upright before the Lord. Now I want you to listen though. After this opened Job his mouth and cursed his day. And Job spake and said, let the day perish wherein I was born, and the night in which it was said, there is a man-child conceived. I want you to listen. Job is speaking in bitterness at this point in time. Is he right in what he's saying? Well, probably not. But sometimes whenever that we are in the situation of where there is a great amount of stress and a great amount of pressure and things are not going the way that we want them to, we don't always think and we don't always speak as rationally as maybe we should. And Job is no exception. What does he do? He says, the day of my birth, he says, I would just wish that it never existed. Let that day be darkness. Let not God regard it from above, neither let the light shine upon it. Just wipe that day completely out of the record. Don't even let the sun shine on the day. Just eliminate it completely from all of everything. Well, obviously we know that can't happen. That's all in the control of God. And God is the one who makes the day, the night. But Job, for one day out of all of it, he wished he could just never have been. I want you to listen to what he says, though. He says, let darkness and the shadow of death stain it. Let a cloud dwell upon it. Let the blackness of the day terrify it. If there's going to be that day, let it be a miserable day. Not hearing much about Job celebrating his birthday, are you? He's not very happy to say, this was my birthday, and so we're going to celebrate. No, not quite the contrary. As for the night, let darkness seize upon it. Let it not be joined unto the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of the months. Just do away with it. Not exist. Don't even let that day be. Now I want you to listen to what else he's got to say. Lo, let that night be solitary. Let no joyful voice come therein. Let them curse it that curse the day, who are ready to raise up their mourning. Let the stars of the twilight thereof be dark. Let it look for light, but have none. Neither let it see the dawning of the day. Just God, you just wipe it completely off. Don't want any. I don't want anyone to even remember that. I don't want it to exist. And the reason that he didn't want it to be was because that was his day of birth. And he's not happy at this point in time. Now, we recognize that what he's asking for was an impossibility. But there are some times whenever that we get in those situations in our own lives, in our own spiritual lives, whenever that we know better, but we don't think better, we don't say better, we don't do better. And how thankful then that we need to be that God is patient, that God is understanding, that God is forgiving, and that he knows that creature that he made is not just right on track. Job is basically saying to God, God, do away with one of those days that you created, that you made. Do away with that light which you gave. Do away with those things. Let the stars of the twilight thereof be dark. Let it look for light, but have none. Neither let it see the dawning of the day. Because it shut not up the doors of my mother's womb, nor hid sorrow from mine eyes. That's why I want you to just eliminate it. Because it didn't stop my mother from having me. Why died I not from the womb? Why did I not give up the ghost when I came out of the belly? Why? Job is now saying, why wasn't I stillborn? Why am I here? Why did I have to experience all of this? I wonder, have there ever been times in your life whenever you wondered why? We ever ask the question, why are these things happening to me? Why are these things going on? Why could I not have been totally different? I suspect that all of us at one time or another, maybe we've not experienced it like Job did, but Job is saying, why could not the doors of my mother's womb not have been shut up? Why did I not die from the womb? Why did I not give up the ghost when I came out of the belly? Why did the knees prevent me? Or why the breast that I should suck? For now should I have lain still and been quiet. I should have slept. Then had I been at rest. If I'd have just been stillborn, if I'd have just not been born at all, if I'd have been a miscarriage, then I wouldn't be experiencing what I'm experiencing right now. I wouldn't have known all of this pain. I wouldn't have known all of this distress in my life. I wouldn't have all of this disappointment. Not very logical thinking, is it? But sometimes our thinking gets a little messed up. And sometimes it happens because of things that are happening in our lives. I'm concerned that many of our people today are experiencing what Job did over the crises that we are in. And that sometimes we're not thinking logically, we're not thinking rationally, we're not thinking what is best, and not realizing that God still is in control of everything. And we're saying, why? Why couldn't this have happened? Why did this have to happen? Why was this? I know that it's easy for us to get in that. Job said, you know what? He said, if I'd have just not been born or been stillborn, then I'd be out here. I wouldn't know what it was to experience all this pain and all this hurt that I'm going through. I'd have already been laying out there in the city of the dead. I'd have been out there in the graveyard with those people who are better off than I am. Let me tell you what I find as I read through the word of the Lord, that most of the time when things are going well, and I say this for God's people, I'm not talking about the world that's lost, they don't know, but for God's people, as long as things are going well, hey, everything's great. But when adversity comes and when problems comes and trials come, we're prone to do just like people have done all down through the ages. And we'll go back, start with God's chosen people, children of Israel. Heard me say this many, many times that, what they got themselves in trouble. They'd get out of business with the Lord, and the Lord would bless them and deliver them. And just as soon as they started getting what they needed, what they wanted, and being blessed again, the first thing they do, they forget the Lord. Get themselves in trouble again. Remember, whenever they were making the trip up out of the land of Egypt, how excited they were that they were going to get to leave that bondage that they were in. But they hadn't gone very far until they're griping and they're complaining and murmuring, oh, we'd have been better off we could just stay down there and lived in that land of bondage. It looked better behind than it could ahead. And God was still blessing them, still patient with them. I'm reminded of Elijah. After that great, powerful deliverance that God had given to him, when he had called all of the people together and put out the challenge to the prophets of Baal and of the grove. And God had answered his prayer and sent the fire down from out of heaven. That one woman spoke unto him and said, I'll have your hide. You're going to die for this. As powerful and as much faith as Elijah had to get the fire down from out of heaven to consume the water, the sacrifice, and everything, as soon as he heard that, he took off and ran. He was afraid. He ran for his life. And as he ran, he went out there, and after he'd run until he was exhausted and he fell down, he prayed and he said, Lord, just let me die. Let me die. She's after me. She's going to kill me. Just let me die. I've said a number of times, if he really wanted to die, why didn't he just stay there and let her kill him? He didn't really want to die. The children of Israel really didn't want to go back to Egypt. They were complaining and murmuring, and yet God blessed them and led them on. When he finally got them up there to where that he was going to take them into the promised land and had showed them exactly what they were going to get, they did not want, they couldn't believe that. So they murmured and they complained again. Job at this point in time is complaining, and he's saying, I'd be better off if I was in the grave than I am right now. You see, again, Job could not see ahead like we're able to see what happened to him. At that point in time, he could not see the future as to what God was going to do for him, that God was going to bless him more than he had ever been blessed before in his life. But right now, Job's not in that condition. And he's saying, For now should I have been still, lain still, and been quiet, I should have slept, then had I been at rest. With kings and counselors of the earth, which built desolate places for themselves. He said, I would have been out there. I'd have been there with the rich people. I'd have been in there with the kings in the city of the dead, with the elite. He also said then, or with princes that had gold, who filled their houses with silver, or as an hidden untimely birth, I had not been as infants which never saw light. So I'd also been out there with those stillborns that never had any of those possessions. But I'd been better off for being out there than I am here. There the wicked cease from troubling, and there the weary be at rest. Job says even the wicked are better off than me. They don't even have any troubles now because they're dead. And I'd be better off if I was there. There the prisoners rest together. They hear not the voice of the oppressor. The small and the great are there, and the servant is free from his master. Wherefore is light given to him that is in misery, and life unto the bitter in soul, which long for death, but it cometh not, and dig for it more than for hid treasures, which rejoice exceedingly and are glad when they can find the grave. Job says, you know what? Man, I look for that. The Bible very clearly teaches there's going to come another time in the end time whenever that men are going to cry out for death to overtake them because of some of the torture that's going to come to them here upon the face of the earth. That's hard for us to imagine, that people will literally cry out for death to escape what's going on, and it will not come. Job is here saying, you know, why is it? Here I am. I'm begging. I'm pleading that I might be able to escape all of this and be in the city of the dead. For my sighing cometh before I eat, and my roarings are poured out like the waters. For the thing which I greatly feared is come upon me. Job says, see, I worried about this. I feared this might happen sometime. And here it is. It's happened to me. And now I can't get it. And that which I was afraid of is coming to me. I was not in safety, neither had I rest, neither was I quiet, yet trouble came. I'm going to stop there. That's all he says in his first dissertation. But let me just be sure that I don't leave you with the thought that Job was such a terrible man, because he did not curse God, never. He also came to realize that some of the statements that he had made, and he admits it later on, were erroneous, that some of his thinking was wrong. Now his good friends who came here to help him and to support him, each one by one. You need to read the whole book of Job, and I guess for a lot of you, you've got a lot of time on your hands right now, so you could spend some of that time. A lot of our people are worrying what they're going to do with their time. Well, many of them would probably do well if they would just pick up this book and read it once in a while, and maybe that would occupy some of their time, and maybe that's some of our people who could do that. But anyway, what I started to say was that when his friends listened to him, then they came back with their retort as to what they thought had brought all of this upon Job. And his first one thinks he's a hypocrite. They each one of them has had a vision and a dream as to why this has all happened, and he explains it to him. And so it's interesting. But the bottom line is that at this point in time, Job is not very happy about his birthday. he doesn't think much of the day that he was born. The Bible very clearly says that the day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. Now, I say that every once in a while at a funeral, but I'm very selective about that because I usually say that if I know that person has been saved and they've left some type of testimony. That would be true, and it still is true. We as Christians can't even seem to accept that, though, because we still rejoice at a birth and we mourn at a death. And the Bible teaches we should be doing the opposite, especially for a child of God. In closing this morning, let me say this. Each one of us at some point in our lives may have experienced not probably the physical pain that Job was experiencing at this time. We may not have experienced the spiritual pain or the mental pain that he was experiencing at this point in time, but we've had similar, and so we can probably relate a little bit to what he was doing. But the thing that I think I need to be sure that you understand is that through all of this, God is still in control over all of it. God knows what's going down here with Job and with his friends, and he knows that Job is going to come around and realize he's there. And so sometimes we just have to remember the Lord is long-suffering to usward, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. Thank you for your good attention this morning. Tracy, come and lead us in our closing song this morning.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to feel, and grace my fears relieve. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangerous toils and snares, we have already come. 'Twas grace that brought us safe thus far, and grace will lead us home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Oh,